Okay, well, let's welcome Vanessa onto the program. Last Vanessa, and we're going to get kicked off here with Angela Merkel.
Yeah, this was an interview that Merkel did for Zeit media in Germany, I think a couple of days ago. And basically, this was reported in RT. Merkel has admitted deception over the Minsk peace deal. And then reading from the text in the article in an interview with Zeit magazine published on Wednesday, Merkel said that the Minsk protocol brokered by Germany and France was an attempt to give Ukraine time, which it used to become stronger, as evidenced on the battlefield now. Of course, that also means that gave NATO time to build up its own military bases and to send weapons into the Ukrainian forces, including, of course, the neo-Nazi forces of the Azov and Ida and various other battalions. She was referring to the first of the two documents known collectively as the Minsk agreements that were designed to help Kiev reconcile with rebels in the east, in Donbass, who had rejected the outcome of the US-backed armed coup in Kiev 2014. But what is interesting, in the Zeit interview, Merkel stated that Russia could easily have overrun Ukrainian troops in 2015, adding that she doubted that NATO countries could have done as much then as they do now. So effectively, she's saying, and I have to say, this reminds me very much of, for example, the Syrian Arab Army and Russian liberation campaign in East Aleppo in 2016, which, if people remember back then, was constantly halted by the UN, i.e., the US and UK and EU cabal, calling for ceasefires in order to allow the armed groups dominated by Al Qaeda to regroup and be rearmed with weapons that were coming in, often with UN so called humanitarian convoys into eastern Aleppo. So this reminds me very much of that situation. Then we had Maria Zakharova from the Russian Foreign Ministry immediately after seeing the interview with Merkel, and she said basically in one of her press briefings, what Merkel said in her interview is the testimony of a person who directly stated that everything that was done in 2014 and 15 had one goal: to divert the view of the world community from real problems, to play for time, to pump up the Kiev regime with weapons, and lead the matter to a big conflict. Zakharova has also basically said that she considers Merkel's remarks to be legitimate evidence of foul play that will be investigated by the War Crimes Tribunal that has been established by Russia.
And Vanessa, this sort of really undermines the Western narrative that they keep the big talking point across the media. This is a war of choice by Putin, and this active aggression, as if the timeline of history began on February 25th, 2022. Yeah. But this is actually the key point, isn't it? Minsk, the peace process, was there, was available, but wasn't seen through, and it looks like
it wasn't genuine. Yeah, it wasn't genuine, basically. I think that is what Merkel is saying, and it's kind of interesting because of all the German leaders that I would have expected in a way to be more sympathetic towards Russia and to have pivoted towards Russia during her leadership. I don't know if you agree, Pat, would have been Merkel. So it's kind of interesting that she's coming out with this statement now that effectively, as you say, undermines the NATO narrative in Ukraine. Interesting.
Well, I think to that I would add, to Vanessa and Mike, I would add that if Merkel was so anti-Russian, well, clearly not, but she wouldn't have signed the Nord Stream 2 pipeline agreement and moved forward with such a big joint project. But the juggernaut of politics and outrage and everything over the last 12 months, I think is too much for any Western politician to bear. But now, with a little bit of distance and as things are settling into a very dark place for Ukraine, I think a lot of people are speaking up. A dark place for Europe too this winter, not figuratively speaking either.
Well, good news, Patrick, because Volodymyr Zelensky is the person of the year.
That's right. That's right. People always complain about this show, Mike, say it's all bad news. It's not all bad news, folks. This is a feel-good story. Time magazine has awarded their Person of the Year, formerly Man of the Year, that's not politically correct, Person of the Year, to none other than Volodymyr Zelensky, or if you speak Russian, Vladimir Zelensky. But he has, you notice Time's using just one I on the end. He has two Y's in Vogue and all the other, that's a marketing exercise. But anyway, let's not digress. So he's been given the big award here. So this is the most influential person in the world, according to Time magazine. And here he is here. Let's take a look at the cover, Mike. There it is. You can see him looking pensive and somewhat bewildered at this kind of cast of characters around him. So it's not just Volodymyr Zelensky, Mike. It's also the spirit of Ukraine the spirit of Ukraine is also the co-beneficiary of this year's award. So look at that. Isn't that interesting? Like, who are all these people? One of them actually caught my eye, Mike, and it's this one here. Like, who is this guy? That's a familiar face. I looked at that and I thought, I know that face. I know that face. Where do I know that face? Let's blow that up a little bit. Who is this man? And it's none other, Mike, than the British, the famed war zone physician, Dr. Knott. Why is he on the cover of Time, right in Zelensky's ear? Right there. I mean, it's just extraordinary. And so we had to dig, well, yeah, that's the standard press image there. There he is, Royal Society of Medicine, Dr. David Knott. And just to refresh people's memories, we have a clip of him visiting East Aleppo in 2014, doing a sort of returning to where he used to work in the hospital. And we'll comment after this. I'm sure Vanessa has a few things to say about this gentleman and his exploits in Syria. But go ahead and roll this.
Homes.
Oh yeah. So now we're on top of one of the hospitals where I worked last year, and you can see it was barrel bombed. There were two barrel bombs, one dropped here and one dropped over there on top of the hospital to try and destroy it. So last year I was saying that that the hospital was attempted to be destroyed, but this year you can see the destruction. I remember having my photograph taken, remember?
I advise not to
stay up here too long.
Yeah, too dangerous there up there on the roof. So that's Dr. Knott, and so he's known as this guy who goes to war zones and operates on the wounded in war zones. The only problem is, Mike, he only operates on one side of the conflict, and it's usually the side of NATO, whether it's in Syria or Libya or in wherever, Bosnia.
Yeah.
So this is why he's famous. He's got a big foundation. Again, why is he on the cover of Time next to Zelensky? Well, he's been doing, I guess, this work in Ukraine as well. Take a wild guess which side of the conflict he's on and who he's working on. But Vanessa, you know, he shot to fame in our eyes when he claimed, I think it was on a BBC report, that he had to instruct surgeons by Skype because it was too dangerous, but that the Russians hacked the Skype call, got the location, the GPS location, and then bombed the M10 hospital in East Aleppo. Is that the name of the hospital? I believe that we visited that hospital, didn't we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was directly opposite a Nusra Front headquarters and a White Helmet headquarters that were shared facilities, of course, as they were throughout Syria. But also the really, the kind of the major story that broke with Dr. Knott, if you remember, was back in, I think it was 2012 or 13, the story of the Syrian Arab Army sniper who had managed to kill a fetus in a pregnant woman's belly. And the X-ray image of the bullet in the fetus head from inside the woman's stomach was published all over the BBC, The Guardian, The Times, before, of course, being completely debunked by genuine medical professionals who said, you know, this is entirely impossible. Had the bullet entered a fetus's brain through the woman, you wouldn't have the intact womb, and also the fetus would be disintegrated, and you wouldn't have the bullet in perfect form in the fetus's head. I mean, it's insane. But of course, people suspend disbelief, but not also, of course, established medics under fire, which also included Hamish de Bretton Gordon of the fridge bomb fame, and the amplification of the chemical weapon narratives in Syria, close friend of James Lemessurier, who established the white helmets. But also in Medics Under Fire was Toby Cadman, the UK FCO-funded lawyer that is contracted to basically bring war crimes charges against President Assad. And I think her name is Dr. Sayela Hassan, who was, I could have that name completely wrong,
I think that's right.
who was,
I
of
think that's
course,
right,
involved
Vanessa.
in British BBC Panorama saving Syria's children. So there you go. That's a small part of Dr. Knott's fraudulent pedigree, basically. I can't think of any other way to put it.
Well, he's a national treasure, according to the BBC and others. So he's widely revered and made it to the cover of Time, which is another great achievement for the good doctor there. Let's take a look at that cover again, though, Mike. And there's been a few revisions to this cover, as you might imagine, in the memsphere. Let's take a look at this. A little bit of a transition, metamorphosis, and you get this. This is circulating. Grifter of the Year, Volodymyr Zelensky, and the Nazis of Ukraine. And it's a very different cast of characters, as you can see, surrounding Vladimir, and he looks like he's been in a snowstorm or something. Sean Penn's there on hand, just on the bottom left-hand side. You've got everybody: Victoria Nuland, Hillary Clinton, Angelina Jolie, Biden, of course, Pelosi, and then a whole host of Nazi Azov battalion fighters there. So it's very interesting. So people are pastiching this, and this is another version here. This is Volodymyr Zelensky and Sam Bankman-Fried, a sort of hybrid character there. Vladimir Bankman is the man of the year, person of the year there. So laundering money in Ukraine, you get the joke. It's not really funny because it's true.
Yeah.
So what happened, Mike? I posted that cover on my Facebook page yesterday. I was so excited about this award for Zelensky. I thought, I want to post this on my Facebook page, and just kind of, well, I didn't really cheer it on. I criticized it. And so someone asked in my thread, Mike, they said, didn't Adolf Hitler get Time's Man of the Year as well? And I said, of course he did. And I posted a JPEG of a Time magazine cover from 1938 of Adolf Hitler, and my account got suspended for another 60 days. So that's after just getting back on Facebook after being off for the last 6 months. And so look at that. There we go. There's my various restrictions there. But I've seen this image on other people's. I'm not complaining. I'm not saying I'm being targeted. But I have seen that image on many other people's accounts and still circulating to this day. So unfortunately, this issue is being very tightly policed on social media. Facebook is whitewashing Nazism in the Ukraine, and that's the bottom line, and that's the real joke of it all and the community standards at Facebook.